Hello, everyone. I am so delighted to have you here for this summer workshop series on creative placemaking. Give me just one moment while I get situated here and share my screen with you and get my notes pulled up. I think we are good to go. To start, if you're not totally sure what creative placemaking even means, you're not alone. The reaction that I get most often when I bring it up is, I'm not sure if I even know what that means. That's exactly what this session is for. But first, a quick introduction. My name is May Hamrick. I am the Arts Advocacy Chair on the board of the Rutherford Arts Alliance. Last year, our advocacy group did a summer book club, and this year I'm back with this workshop series, which was made possible by a Special Opportunities Arts Forward grant from the Tennessee Arts Commission. That grant covered my attendance at the South and Appalachian Creative Placemaking Summit in Memphis, organized by Creative Placemaking Communities and Community Lift. I don't know if TAC will open that grant back up to individuals again this year, but I do know the application opens July 1st, and I will put the link in the resource list for anyone who's interested in following along. A quick word on that resource list that I just mentioned. Everything I talk about in this series, the organizations, the books, the grants, the projects, they all, links for them all live there in that resource list. You will see a link to it wherever this video is shared. It is a live Google Doc, so more things will be added as we go. And that means if you know of something that you think should be added, email me and I am happy to put it in there. Also, if I mention something and you don't see it on the list, just let me know and I'd be happy to fix that. Okay, so my proposal for this grant was to go and learn and bring back what I learned to as many people in Rutherford County as I could. I have also spent most of my career working in the arts in community engagement and arts education. So what I'm sharing comes from both the summit in Memphis and from my own experience. So, my goal for today is that you walk away with a real understanding of what creative placemaking is, and maybe even some ideas that you can start putting into action. Session two, that one is live. It is on Zoom Wednesday, July 15th, 6 to 7 p.m. It is called Building Together, a workshop in resilient community development. I will share the recording after, but I really recommend joining live because it is interactive. And if no one shows up live, we won't have a session to record. So, through a guided group activity, we are going to map our collective skills, perspectives, and passions, find the common threads, and start imagining what we could build toward a shared vision for Rutherford County. Session three is pre-recorded like this one. We'll look at creative placemaking in action through real projects across the Southeast, then turn the lens on Rutherford County, what's already happening here, what's possible, and how you can be a part of it. So you'll notice I won't be mentioning a lot of real examples in today's session just for the sake of time. Just know that I am saving all of those up for session three. Okay, I think one of the last little housekeeping notes before we get started. I just wanted to talk for a moment about our REA membership. If you are not a member, I would encourage you to join. We connect creatives and community. We fund initiatives like our K through 12 Art Scholarship and the Art of Unburdening Workshop series. Membership also comes with some great perks like free workshop access, local discounts, The link to become a member is included in the resource list I mentioned, along with the link to register for this series if you haven't already. Registering will make sure that you are sent the reminders and the invite for session 2, as well as a notification once the session 3 recording is available. Okay, a quick word on how to use this session. So this is not a bite-sized definition. It is much more comprehensive. However, I have worked hard to keep it from being too heavy or academic. And it is my hope that you can watch it even when I've tried to make it very digestible. So you can watch it even when you're low on energy, say after a long day at work, or maybe on the weekend after doing some yard work in this Tennessee heat and humidity, if it will ever stop raining on the weekends, and still be able to enjoy it and come away inspired. So I anticipate this session to run anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half in total, so you don't have to take it all in at once. That's one of the reasons there is a whole month between now and the next session, and also why it is pre-recorded, so you can go through it at your own pace. There are a few journaling prompts along the way, and those are great natural places to pause, to step away, and come back whenever you're ready. So grab a pen and paper on that note, or a digital device for taking notes if that's more your style. And don't be afraid to use that pause button as often as you need to. If you need to pause now to go grab a pen and some paper, go ahead. Okay, so now on to what we're really here for. Today, I'm going to present you with 7 building blocks of creative placemaking that I have had experience with in my own career and that I was able to learn even more about at the summit. And the very first one that we are going to start with is defining what is creative placemaking. Okay, so here's our very first prompt. With your pen and paper in hand, I want to start by asking you to do something. I want you to take a pause, and you can close your eyes if it helps. I want you to try and think of a moment when you walked into a place or an event, and from the moment that you walked in and looked around, you just felt this magic, this immediate sense of, this is it. I have been looking for this. I belong here. I want to stay here. Take a moment to think of a time when you felt that. And you can hit pause here if you need to take a moment to think about it. I have found that this feeling usually comes on before we even fully have the words for it. It can be the sounds or the smells or just the vibe we get from people as we scan the room and see how they're interacting with each other. If people look relaxed, happy, warm, welcoming, it may be hard to identify the single thing that's giving you that feeling. And that's likely because it's not just any one single thing, but rather the collection of all of it together. Whatever it is, we often feel it in our bodies before we can fully articulate it or understand it in our minds. And many of us have never taken a step back to fully examine it before today, to even try to articulate what exactly makes those places and those gatherings so special. So I'll share the first one that comes to my mind when I do this exercise. If you're native to this area or you've lived here a while, you may even share similar memories of this event with me. Murfreesboro, where I currently live, was once host to Uncle Dave Macon Days. Our city hosted that event for 42 years. I mostly grew up out in Rockville, Tennessee, but we would often come to Murfreesboro to shop and to participate in different community events. My mother and I, we both made things. We made paintings, mosaics, other crafts, and we would go around to different craft fairs and festivals to sell our stuff. And one of those festivals was Uncle Dave Bacon Days. And it just kind of became a yearly tradition for us for a while. And I can remember as a child, as a teen, that this festival was just so special. Even if you weren't actively raised listening to this kind of music, you would hear it all around at the festival and just, my family has been here in the South for a long time. So I just felt that so deep in my roots. And you'd go through the crowd there and you'd smell the funnel cake and the kettle corn and you'd hear the banjos and the fiddles in the air and you'd see so many crafts and artists and you'd smell and hear the blacksmithers doing their thing. And just as a child, I didn't fully understand the historical significance of that music or the festival, but I didn't need to. I didn't need to know all of that to know that I felt belonging there. It defined something in me about what it means to have roots in this place, in my community, in the South. And the detailed understanding of what that music meant historically came later, but the feeling is what was there first. So, those special events and the feelings that come with them are what we are talking about here today. But this kind of event or space doesn't even strictly have to be in the arts. It can happen at a farmer's market or a church or a family gathering or even just a random night on a downtown square without any kind of special event happening at all. If creative placemaking is done well, it can transform these otherwise ordinary spaces that we interact with regularly or even every day. That feeling that you get in events and spaces like that, it doesn't often just happen by accident. It is often someone or a whole community of someone's that have made choices that created the conditions for that moment. One of my favorite quotes from the summit was, "Closer is palpable. You feel it before you can name it." I believe it was Carol Coletta who said that. I have a few of her quotes and lots of her concepts and theories throughout this. She was one of the keynote speakers at the summit. That is creative placemaking. Most of us have experienced it at some point in our lives, even if we didn't know what it was called. Ultimately, that is what these events and spaces do. They bring us as a community closer together. But sometimes we can all be physically present in a room together, and it does not give the same feelings that we are talking about here today. I mean, if you think about it, we are physically closer when we're waiting at the DMV. But I feel very differently about the DMV than I do about, say, Uncle Dave Macon Days. So, the kind of closer that we are talking about here is something deeper, something palpable. So, today we're going to study that and we're going to define it and try to understand how it works so we can all be more intentional in making it happen more often in our own communities. So, on a basic level, creative placemaking means using art and local culture to turn a blank public space into a place where people actually want to hang out. It's about fixing up a neighborhood by focusing on the people who live there, not just the buildings. And notice I said art and local culture, not just art, because creative placemaking goes, I think the first thing that comes to people's mind when they hear that term is public art and display. But creative placemaking goes well beyond that. It can be in the decision to put a bench somewhere so that people actually stop and sit. It's in the farmer's market that becomes a weekly reason to leave the house and go out into your community. It's in a community garden, an outdoor concert. It could be the sidewalk that gets built so that a neighborhood feels safe and walkable. It could be someone who decides to put out chalk and bubbles on that sidewalk so kids and even adults will come to it and play. It can be as quiet as a well-placed shade tree, or it can be as lively as a block party. But the common thread is that someone asked, what does this place need to feel alive? And then they did something about it. So the ultimate goal is to make a neighborhood feel more welcoming, more alive, and safer, not just aesthetically nicer, but actually more inhabited, more human. City planning and development makes places more livable, but creative placemaking infuses the arts into places and makes them lovable. Okay, so here's a simple breakdown. The goal of creative placemaking is to make a neighborhood feel more welcoming, alive, and safe. We do that with tools like murals, live music, food festivals, community gardens. These are invitations that we extend to people in hopes of creating that closer feeling that we talked about a moment ago. The process of making that happen means asking neighbors what they want instead of letting outside developers make all of those choices for us. And the result of all of that is transforming a place you used to just ignore or walk past into a space where you actually want to be, where we all stop and spend time. So, creative placemaking is the intentional use of arts and culture to shape the identity, well being, and social life of a place in partnership with the people that live there. Now, one of the words that really matters there is intentional, because as we established earlier, you've likely experienced the outcome of this work at some point in your life. The difference between creative placemaking and just having a nice event is that someone asked intentionally, what are we trying to build here and who is it for? So, this next building block and the ones that come after all address something that I think is a common reaction to everything I just said, which is how. Like, all of that sounds great, but how do we do that exactly? The first and simplest answer to that is to start small. A lot of times, myself included, I'm very guilty of this. We create these barriers for ourselves. If you're even just a little bit of a perfectionist, you likely do this. Um, these barriers, one being that we think we need permission or some kind of buy-in from city officials or people in charge before we begin, that there is a right official way to do this kind of work, when in reality, this is your community. You should be the one in charge. As long as you are being respectful to the people that you share that community with. Two, another barrier is that we tend to think we need a lot of money to get started, when really what we should start with is, what do we have right now? What do we already have available to us that we can use to make something that our community is missing or something that we need? A great example is, I don't know if you've ever played a no spend game in your household or family where you try not to spend any money for a designated period of time. And when you're forced to start looking around your house for things that you already have versus going out and buying something new, you'll start finding all sorts of stuff you forgot that you had, and you'll start making use of stuff that had been collecting dust for a long time. So we can do the same things with the resources already available to us in our networks and in our communities. We'll get to practice this and kind of see it demonstrated firsthand live in session 2. So I am very excited for that and hope that you'll join for that. But the key is to start small and stay consistent. You start with an idea, use what's already available, and show up repeatedly. That consistency is what builds something that really matters. So, a great thing to start with is programming. Programming is the thing that signals to a community that something is happening, that a place is alive, that there's a reason to show up. You don't need a renovated building or a fully funded initiative to start. This can be any kind of regularly occurring event or gathering. It could be a weekly open mic. That's programming. And it's the first domino in all of this. Programming is where everything starts. You think of an issue or problem or need that we have in this community, and then think of a way that people can gather on a regular basis to solve it. Um, Activity creates visibility. Visibility builds trust. Trust attracts funding. Programming is what makes funding possible, not the other way around. We don't start by getting the money typically. We start by making a cool thing with what we have, and then people want to support that and they want to be a part of it. So the visibility and trust and ultimately, funding comes naturally. And we'll see that a lot more in session 3 when we see real life examples of this from around the Southeast. So don't wait for the perfect space or the big grant. Use what you have. Waiting for ideal conditions is how nothing ever gets built. This is one of the more empowering parts of creative placemaking, actually, is a willingness to use the space that you already have. Not the perfect space, not the space that you'll have after the grant comes through or the renovation is finished. It's the space that exists right now, even if it's imperfect, especially if it's imperfect, because the act of showing up and doing something with it is what starts to change what that space means. And imperfect space that is full of life is more powerful than a really beautiful space that sits empty. There's a term for this. You'll hear people in this work say activation a lot. And it means that you're taking a space that's sitting dormant or underused, maybe even avoided, a parking lot, a vacant storefront, a church fellowship hall. It could be an overgrown lot or maybe an underutilized part of a park, and you activate it. You give people a reason to come to it, to be in it. And eventually you feel ownership over it. It doesn't require a master plan or a massive budget. It usually just starts with one small thing, an event, a mural, a gathering, something that says this place is worth showing up for. Creative placemaking looks at a dead space and asks, what could this be? What do we need it to be? So I had a conversation recently with an old friend of mine, Shane Lowry, who works with the Murfreesboro Little Theater. And he was explaining how it was a struggle for them at first to lose the building that they used to operate in. I actually, a long time ago, used to do theater there as a child in that building. But ultimately, what that led them to was holding their shows in public spaces, in parks, in libraries, and now they are reaching people they never would have reached from the building that they had before. So that's what showing up in an imperfect space can do. You encounter something new or someone different. And a theater performance you might never have bought a ticket to, but now that it's right in front of you, meeting you where you are, you might walk away changed or inspired. So, what does any one particular community, town, or space need? Well, that partly depends on the space, but more than that, I think it depends on the people who inhabit it. You ask the people who actually live there what they need, what they want, what they're proud of, what's causing disconnect between them. The kinds of things creative design and the arts and placemaking might actually be able to solve. You put the people who know the place best in the driver's seat. This is what's sometimes called people-ready development, and it's a different starting point than what we usually mean by development. Most development starts with a building or a budget or a plan drawn up, sometimes from people outside of the community it's actually meant to serve. People-ready development starts with the people first, their skills, their stories, their frustrations, their hopes. You start with the people, and then the physical place follows. And starting there makes the difference because it makes the difference between something that lasts and actually means something to your community's history and something that doesn't. A project can have all the official approvals, all the funding, all the right signatures, and still fail to take root with the entire community because the people who actually live there, all of the people who live there, don't feel like it's theirs. But when people feel like something is theirs, they protect it. They maintain it. They bring their friends. They tell the story of it. The real authority over a place is not the people who sign off at the top, it is in the community itself. So, our next building block, proximity and weak ties. Proximity. So, people want to be closer to one another. Social cohesion is built on casual, face-to-face interactions. People want places that make connection easier. They want to be closer to one another. So think about what it feels like to walk down a main street that's alive. There's music coming from somewhere, people are sitting outside, kids are running around, people are talking to each other. You slow down, you look around, something in you relaxes and opens up a little bit because your body reads these signals that people are here and people are welcome here. Something is happening here. Now I want you to think about what it feels like to walk down a main street that isn't alive. It might have shuttered storefronts. There's no one sitting outside, no reason to slow down or to linger. You move through it faster, and maybe without even registering it, without fully realizing it, you've just had a tiny experience of disconnection. That feeling of aliveness, that sense that something is going on here from the previous example, it is not just accidental. It is the result of choices. It is proximity by design, and it is one of the most powerful things that creative placemaking can build. So, proximity used to be unavoidable. You had to go to the store, the bank, the post office, the square. You ran into people you didn't choose constantly just by living your life. And almost none of that is required anymore. You can work, shop, bank, eat, and be entertained without ever being in unplanned proximity to another person. The casual nearness that used to be a byproduct of daily life has quietly been designed out of it. We are more digitally connected than any generation in history, and we are also, by most measures, lonelier. And what the research tells us, and what I think most of us already feel, is that it is very hard to build real community and trust through a screen all on its own. Now, I know full well I'm saying that as someone who is a big champion for virtual events, and this event itself is virtual. And I want to touch on that for just a moment because I think it's important. So, for a time in my life, I was a very broke single mom working all the time who was still very passionate about the arts, but often the only way I could participate in things was if I could access them in my own time on the internet after my kids had gone to bed. Honestly, to this day, even as my kids have gotten a little older and some of my life circumstances have changed, still, so often, one of the only ways I can participate in things is at home from my computer. I am in a master's program right now, and it's all virtual. And thank goodness, because I wouldn't be able to be getting my master's right now. I work remotely so that I can have more flexibility for my kids and their schedules. Outside of my own experience, I also know people who are homebound for health reasons or disability reasons, or people who can't go out into crowds. And so I think that digital spaces are a gift and a tool and something we can use to invite people in who, for a myriad of reasons, might not be able to participate otherwise. But we still have to be very intentional about how we design and use these spaces even when they're digital. So, if proximity used to happen on its own and now it doesn't, someone has to make it happen on purpose. Proximity by design, creative placemaking at its root, is the deliberate manufacturing of reasons for people to keep ending up near each other. So ultimately, what builds community is being in the same space repeatedly over time. Civic life, the kind where you trust your neighbor, where you feel accountable to your block, where you actually know the people who share your community, that is built on proximity, on casual, repeated, face to face interaction, on what happens between buildings, not just inside of them. So, creative placemaking is fundamentally about building and protecting that proximity. It is creating the conditions where people end up near each other and then deciding what happens once they do. And the very first thing that happens when people keep ending up near each other is they start to form what are called weak ties. So, strong ties are the people you already know well. They are your family, your close friends, the people you'd call in a crisis. You know who they are. They know you. The bond is already there. Weak ties are the people you just sort of know, or someone you only meet in passing. It's the neighbor that you wave to. It's the person you always see at the farmer's market or the grocery store. It is your barista, someone you strike up a brief conversation with in line somewhere or in a waiting room at the doctor's office. One of my favorite recent wheat tie encounters was recently when I was hiking at Barfield Crescent Park. I ran into this man who was just so excited to show me a bird that he had just spotted nearby. There was this big woodpecker on a tree, just completely unbothered by us. And I don't know if I'll ever see or talk to that man again. Even if I did, I might not even know it because I don't know if I remember what he looked like. But we shared this little moment of being excited about something so simple in nature. And I don't know what his religion or political beliefs were. I don't know if he was rich or poor. Absolutely none of that mattered, or was it all relevant to us sharing this small passing moment together? So, if you want to, you can take a second and try to think of a moment that you've experienced like that recently. A passing moment that you had with a stranger, or maybe it's someone you just kind of know, but not really, like a cashier that you frequently interact with at a store that you go to a lot, or a neighbor that you say hi to every once in a while. Here's why weak ties matter so much. A lot of things actually happen through them. That is one way that information travels through a community. They are a small way that an otherwise fragmented community starts to feel closer together, one little stitch at a time. Strong ties hold your life together, but weak ties keep you connected to the larger world around you, and they're what hold a community together. You can't manufacture strong ties. You can't make people become close friends, but you can manufacture weak ties reliably just by creating the conditions for repeated low stakes encounters in shared space. So that is exactly what creative placemaking does. You don't have to become best friends with someone at the farmer's market or someone you smile and wave at when you're passing them on the street. You just have to be aware of the other people around you. So I want you to think of a place in your life that functions as a bridge. Somewhere you go where you encounter people you wouldn't otherwise cross paths with, a place where different parts of your community actually meet. We have very important and meaningful spaces where people gather over a shared interest. We have church, a knitting group, a book club, a sports team. Ultimately, that's part of what brings us all together for this very workshop is a shared interest. And those matter. But what is maybe even more important are the spaces where we gather with random people that we know nothing about, people we might have nothing in common with at all. These are the places doing some really important work, and we need more of them. Okay, so let's talk about participation and engagement. So you might have a mural on the side of a building, a sculpture in a park, a performance on a stage. I've already said that these are the common things we think of when we think of creative placemaking. And these things are beautiful and important, and there are some ways that you can make these very inclusive of the community so that they really represent them. They add identity and meaning to a place, but when we experience them, we are mostly observers. We show up, we take it in, and then we leave. And it doesn't really require anything from us. But then there is another kind of art. It's the kind you actually participate in. It's that programming that we talked about earlier, the open mic where you get up and you share something, a community garden where you go and you get your hands dirty, the art class, the book club. These aren't things you observe. You are in them, you are a part of them. So creative placemaking needs both. But I think if we're honest, we'll find that most communities tend to overinvest in the observable and underinvest in the participatory. And I understand why. Participatory programming is harder. It's messy. People are complicated and unpredictable. And the more that you bring them into the ongoing life of something, the less controlled that it gets. But that messiness, the lack of control, is exactly the point. The mess is the community. When people are complicated and unpredictable, it means that they're showing up fully, that they are actually invested and they are showing up as themselves. And that's not necessarily a problem to manage around. That's what you're trying to build. So here's what's really at stake in it is it's the difference between an audience and an owner. When you only observe, you're an audience. You take you take the place in and you leave. But when you participate, you start to own it. And the owners are the ones who come back, who take care of it. Participation is how a place stops being something people just pass through and it becomes something that they belong to. A perfect example of this was when I worked with Murfreesboro's Cultural Arts Department. We did this program called Art in the Park, and we would take art supplies and instruments and crafts out to pavilions in the park, and we would invite anyone who wanted to come in and participate. And, excuse me, something always happened that we couldn't plan for. Sometimes it was wind or weather. A lot of times it was people. A kid might start using a marker on a picnic table. Another kid might take off running with a maraca. Like any teacher knows this is just what happens in any kind of education, but I feel like especially arts education. And it always gets extra awkward when the child's parent is standing right there and you're stuck deciding, like, do I wait for them to stop this or do I step in? So that lack of control that we experience isn't the program failing, it is the program working. The moment you invite real people in, you also give up control over who shows up and sometimes how they treat each other, which is real, but it's not something to necessarily solve. And it's kind of the whole subject of the next building block that I'm going to talk about, which is hosting. So, hosting is what determines whether a place is warm or cold, whether someone walks in and thinks, this is for me, or turns around and thinks, I'm not wanted here. This place is not for me. Hosting is the active, ongoing work of making people feel like they were expected. It's the person at the entrance who makes eye contact and smiles. It's signage that's clear enough so that no one has to feel lost or awkward in trying to figure out where to go. It's thinking in advance about who might show up and whether the space actually accommodates them, their mobility, their language, their schedule, their comfort level with crowds. It's noticing when someone is standing alone at the edge of a room and going over to them. It's the follow through after, the thank you, the recap, the invitation to come back. This work is often invisible because the best hosting disappears into the experience. It is just a seamless part about it. And people just feel good. And they can't always say exactly why, but if you remove it, you feel that too. A poorly hosted space just kind of has this chill to it. And hosting is chronically undervalued. We tend to pour resources into the aesthetics of a space, the mural, the lighting, the decor, and then we leave the human welcome of it to chance. But here's what happens when you leave welcome to chance. A space doesn't stay neutral. It quietly becomes the territory of whoever already feels like they belong there. And everyone else picks up on that, and sometimes they don't come back. So the human welcome is often the whole thing. It is the difference between a space people return to and one that they tried once and never came back to. And it's how you keep a space from becoming one group's turf instead of everyone's. So you don't have to be a city planner. You just have to decide that belonging is worth building and then just do the small, consistent, often invisible work of building it. And that welcome is partly the human work I just described, but it can also be built into the space itself, into the design choices you make even before anyone arrives. So a lot of it lives in the details that are really easy to overlook, like is there somewhere to sit? Is there shade? Is there something to actually do? Or are people just there to watch or to sit around? Is it free? Is it low cost? Is it physically accessible? Are the people on the stage actually representative of the people in the audience? Welcome is a design choice. Warmth, inclusiveness, these are design choices. And creative placemaking asks us to put thought into that and to make those choices on purpose. So I'll put a longer list in the resource list, but just to give you a feeling of what that can look like, some examples, it might mean rotating in vendors and performers from different parts of your community or from other communities so that people run into food and traditions they wouldn't have otherwise. It might mean having bilingual signage or a quiet or sensory zone for the folks who need one. And it doesn't mean that you use this as a checklist and that you do every single thing every time. That might not always be feasible. But we do try and we do stop and put thought and effort into it because the thing is, people are not always going to ask to be accommodated. And I think that's why this work is really ongoing. If we want to welcome a wide range of people, we have to anticipate their needs ahead of time. We have to play host and think about what's going to make them feel comfortable and welcome, and really get creative about the signals that we send that say, you belong here. And I don't think that question of what do people need is ever one that we stop asking ourselves. I run this digital workshop right now, knowing full well by the end of it that there will be things I will think of after the fact that I could have done to make it more inclusive. That is the nature of this. It's happened with everything I've ever done. But I think the point is not to get it perfect, but to keep it in mind and to always keep trying and learning. One of the keynote speakers at the summit said something. I think this one was also Carol Coletta. She said, good public life doesn't erase difficulty or difference. It doesn't require everyone to agree or get along perfectly, but it does require people who are willing to hold a space open to, this is another important one that I think she said, to make it civil without making it policed. To make it welcoming without making it exclusive. So that's the answer to a fear I think a lot of us carry into this work, even if we are afraid to say it out loud. It's just if I really open this space up to everyone, won't it get chaotic? Won't there be people that I don't click with, or people who are a little too much, or people who don't do things the way I would, who don't believe the same things that I do? Yeah, there will be. If you do this right, there absolutely will be. And there will sometimes be a committee member who gets on your nerves or a neighbor who's a little awkward to talk to. I'm sure I've been that neighbor at times. Like that friction, it's the friction of peopling, as I call it. It doesn't mean that something has gone wrong. You're not trying to make everyone agree or get along perfectly or become best friends. You're not asking the whole community to move in with you. You are just holding the space open enough that all those different people can share it. And that holding is the host's job. They don't smooth away every difference or shut down every bit of friction, they make room for it. That's what good public life actually is. It is not a frictionless room, but one where differences can sit side by side. And it's what creative placemaking builds when it's done right. And it's what hosting makes possible. So I'd argue that hosting is one of the most essential skills in creative placemaking, but it doesn't mean that you personally have to feel like you are a great host to do this kind of work in your community. Sometimes it just means knowing how to recognize that quality in the people around you and knowing who's going to take on that very important job. It's the art of seeing the strengths in the people around you and then figuring out how you all come together, each with your own talents, to make something none of you could have made alone. And again, I'm going to keep putting these teasers and these plugs for session 2 in here because that's exactly what we'll be doing there. So I hope that you will join us. Let's talk about the arts and artists. So sometimes when we hear arts and culture, a certain image forms. A gallery or a symphony, something that can feel a little elevated or fancy or even elitist. Or for some of us, like it's for some other kind of person. Maybe you don't think of yourself as an artsy person at all. So when we talk about artists and creative placemaking, we mean something much bigger than that. Yes, it does include muralists and musicians and performers, but it also includes it could be a gardener who plots out the space and puts out things on their front lawn to make, things look nicer for their neighbors. It could be a teacher who turns a blank hallway into something that shows off what their students have done that makes people stop and look. It could be a shop owner who puts chairs on the sidewalk because they want people to stop and sit down and talk to each other, or a neighbor who throws a cookout because they want to get to know the people around them better. None of them may have called it creative placemaking, but all of them were doing it. And so every community already has makers in it. We have gardeners, cooks, woodworkers, quilters, muralists, musicians, builders, storytellers, tinkerers, and they are one of the most under-leveraged resources any community has. Creative placemaking says stop treating that as a side thing. Tap into it, put it at the center, give it a stage, a wall, a corner of the farmer's market, a spot on the program, because a place full of things its own people made, that is a place worth showing up for. And here's why that matters so much. Think about the places that have felt the most alive to you, because chances are there were signs of human making everywhere. Handmade things, locally grown things, things that could only ever exist in that particular place, made by those particular people. That specifically isn't decorative. It is the whole point. It's what makes a place irreplaceable instead of interchangeable. There was a time when I was younger when I could not wait to get out of here. I wanted to go to New York. I wanted to go to LA. I wanted to go anywhere but here because I was sure that the culture I was looking for was somewhere else. and that I would have to leave to find it. But over the years, I have watched the opposite happen. People from those places are moving here in waves because of what we have that is uniquely ours here in the South. The very thing that I once wanted to leave behind turned out to be the thing that other people are now driving toward. So, creative placemaking isn't about importing someone else's culture to make your town feel more like someplace else. It is the opposite. It is about noticing what's already here. The makers, the food, the music, the stories, the way we do things, and amplifying it. You don't make a place special by making it look like everywhere else. You make it special by making it more fully itself. So the question isn't whether you're an artist. The question is whether you're willing to bring intention and care to the place that you're already in and the people that you're already among. And if you're watching this, I am guessing that you are someone who is willing to do that work. Which brings us to our very last building block, which is, and sorry, I missed this slide, but our very last building block is the irresistible invitation. So I saved one of my favorites for last, and it's lucky number 7. I was first introduced to this concept through our REA Arts Advocacy Book Club last summer. We read Making Change by Eric Booth. He is widely considered the father of the teaching artist profession. You can find that in our resource list. And Booth talks about something he calls the irresistible invitation. That concept comes from the world of teaching artists, which is the practice of using artistic processes to engage, connect, and activate people, whether it's in schools or communities. A teaching artist's job isn't just to present art, it is to create the conditions where people can't help but participate. And the question at the center of that work is, how do you design a prompt, a space, or an experience that feels impossible not to engage with? So Booth's answer involves what he calls a safe and charged environment. Safe meaning people feel that they can show up as they are. They won't be judged or embarrassed or put on the spot in a way that feels threatening. Charged meaning there's enough energy in the room. There is possibility, something that is alive and a little electric that makes people lean in rather than pull away. The magic of a truly irresistible invitation is that it holds both of these things at once, which is a lot harder to do than it sounds because most spaces default to one or the other. Either they're so safe that they're boring or they're so charged that they're intimidating. So the irresistible invitation lives in the tension between them. This same principle applies to any programming we design in our communities. Every event, every gathering, every space we intentionally create is a kind of invitation. The question is whether it's an irresistible one, whether it's designed in a way that makes people feel both safe enough to show up and energized enough to stay and participate. Is it something that people feel drawn to, so drawn to that when it is the end of a long, hard work day and they've maybe just eaten dinner, so you get that tiredness that sets in, and then you've just sat down on the couch, and the idea of getting into your car and driving across town or into town to be around people is so daunting. They have to feel so drawn to what we're doing and so excited about it. It has to be such an irresistible invitation that they will get up off the couch, put their shoes back on, and go and feel re-energized once they get there. Whether they are an introvert or extrovert or something in between. So think back to what we did at the very beginning of this session. I asked you to close your eyes and to think of a place or an event that gave you that immediate sense of, this is it. I belong here. There is something happening here. I need more of this in my life. What you were naming was the experience of an irresistible invitation. You felt it before you could explain it. And ultimately, that's what we're all trying to learn how to build here. So here's the next thing I want you to think about and take some notes on. Think of one space or event in your life that felt truly irresistible. Somewhere you didn't have to talk yourself into going, somewhere you just wanted to go. Maybe this is the same for you as what you thought of for the very first prompt at the beginning of this, but for many of us, I suspect as we dig deeper into this prompt, it's going to be different because what I asked for in the beginning was to think of a place that made you feel good once you were already there. But if you've ever put on a show or a program or even just hosted something at your home, you likely at some point have realized the challenge is not always putting together a cool space or an event. The challenge is often that once you've done that, how do you get people to show up? Now we're thinking about something that it's not about how something feels once we're there, but the invitation. How does it feel before we've showed up? It's that pull to something, the appeal or the allure that makes us get up and go and look forward to it. It's very possible that some of your first answers might not have anything to do with an arts event, and that is okay. Maybe it was church or a barbecue, or maybe it was a community event, or sorry, maybe it wasn't a community event. Maybe it was just going to Target or the mall. Maybe it was going to a community space, but you were intentionally going to be alone in it, like reading in the corner of a library or a coffee shop. Whatever comes up for you, I don't want you to discount your instinctual answer to this because whatever comes to your mind has information for you. It's telling you something. And what comes to my mind is not going to be the same that comes to yours. And that's important too. We need that information from each other. You know what I thought of the first time I thought through this prompt? The very first thing that popped into my head was girls' night. I thought about going to meet up with a small group of really close girlfriends for a round of cocktails where I knew we would all just release and laugh and talk about what's new in our lives, what's exciting us, what's stressing us out. You don't have to talk me into getting up off my couch to go to that most times. I need that. That is therapeutic to me. I feel like I crave that. So the question is, what do you crave? What is irresistible to you? Is it a spa? Is it maybe it's not leaving your house at all? Maybe it's staying on the couch and binging Netflix. Is it painting at your easel or making jewelry or cooking? It could be spending time with your partner, your kids, your pets, spending time alone. I want you to be very open about what the answer could be and try to determine what are some irresistible invitations in your life. So now I want you to examine those things that came to mind and ask yourself why. What makes it so irresistible? So for me, in the example I just gave, my girls' night, I think about that and I think, okay, well, that is permission and space to let go and to be myself. It's getting dressed up a little. It's feeling like this space and this time is special and it's different from what I do every day. It's nostalgic. It reminds me of times when I was young and giggling at a sleepover with my friends. When when I was describing it, I used an important word, which was release. I also described connection. So, what are the ingredients to that irresistible invitation? When we say something like, going to Target or going to the mall, it doesn't necessarily mean that, that is the be all end all to this. What it means is that there's something in that invitation that we can get information from. And that's when we start recreating these situations that people actually want to show up to. You are basically designing a recipe. And it's a recipe that's likely going to change when you bring it together with what other people want or need from a space. What does the girls' night I described look like when now it includes people I don't know or people I don't recognize, people who don't look like me, people who are outside of my immediate circle? How do we find ways to preserve that comfort and that permission to be ourselves, that comfort in vulnerability and in releasing? How do we build that closeness and that connection with a room full of strangers, with people we may not know yet? There are no wrong answers. I don't have answers to everything I just asked you, but just write down everything that you notice because those elements, those specific concrete things are the building blocks of an irresistible invitation. And they are what we're going to start designing with. So we're almost to the end, but hit pause if you need to, if you want to think back on those prompts a little bit and then come back when you're ready. I want to close with a quote that, again, I think this is from Carol Coletta, that she said at the summit, which was, "Public life will not replace itself. It is built by people who decide being closer is worth the effort." The belonging that you have felt at a festival, at a market, at on the square in the evening, that didn't appear by accident. Someone somewhere decided it was worth building, and then they kept showing up to build it. Someone did that work of hosting because they believed that closer was better. Someone sat through maybe an hour-long workshop on creative placemaking and then came back later in the summer and gave 2 more hours to doing this work in this series, I hope. But seriously, whether you continue with this series or not, you can be that person. You don't have to start big. You don't have to have a grant or a nonprofit or a 5-year plan. Just ask yourself, what are you missing from your community? What do you feel like your community as a whole is missing out on? And then think about something small you can do to start to bridge that gap. Here's something I want you to do between now and session 2 if you're planning to join us for that. And this is going to pull together everything you've been thinking about through this session. I want you to take a look back at your notes that I've been asking you to take. There are a few main things that I asked you to stop and reflect on, those prompts that I gave to you. I asked you to think about a place where you felt belonging, and a place in your life that functions as a bridge where you cross paths with people you wouldn't otherwise. And last, we thought about our irresistible invitation. Now, I want you to sit with all of that together and notice what themes come up. What keeps showing up on your list? Is it something about the people, the mix of them, the way they treat each other? Is it something sensory? Is it sound, warmth, light, food? Is it something about purpose, that people are there for a reason, working towards something together? Is it something about welcome, that someone clearly thought about whether you'd feel comfortable there? What does all of that tell you about what you value in your community spaces? And then I want you to take it one step further, turn it around on yourself and ask, what do you care about? Which parts of this community do you feel most connected to or most concerned about? What would you want to see more of? What do you have to offer? Your skills, your experience, your perspective, the things that you're good at. What gets you off the couch? I would love it if you could come to session 2 with some answers to those questions. They don't have to be polished. They don't have to be big or ambitious. They just have to be honest. And session 2 is going to be built around you, around what the group of people who show up, who've gathered together there, what we all actually care about. So, as a reminder, session 2 is on July 15th at 6 p.m. It is live on Zoom. It is interactive. Believe it or not, I'm actually a very shy, introverted person, and I don't like public speaking or speaking out in groups. I hate being put on the spot, but I assure you, this activity is actually based on a workshop I did at the summit, and I was very surprised at how easy it was to participate and to not feel nervous. It will be very accommodating to everyone, even if you're someone who doesn't typically like speaking out in a crowd. You will be asked to share, but it will be very low stakes. And we're just going to go through an activity that will show us that when we bring together a group of people, any group of people, just how much that we can accomplish. So between now and then, I'd love to hear from you. If this session raised a question about creative placemaking, about Rutherford County, about something you've seen in your own neighborhood, please send it in to me. My email address is listed on the resource page. Our activity next week will leave us very pressed for time, but if we do have time for questions, we'll get to them. If not, we'll definitely address them in session 3. Please invite someone you know to this series. They can watch this session and the session coming out in August at their own convenience. If they can't make it live to session 2, there will be a recording. And as I've said, all the resources I mentioned today, the Tennessee Arts Commission grant information, the information on RAA membership, the people I've mentioned and my email address are all in that resource list. So you can go ahead and start diving deeper into these topics today if you want. There are also some great book recommendations and articles. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Thank you for caring about the place that we all call home. And I hope to see you all on July 15th.